Heroes of Might and Magic Olden Era is the newest game in the HOM franchise, which, to my understanding, has a very long history, and is one of the deepest grand strategy games I've played in a while, with a steep but extremely rewarding learning curve. Also, if you're wondering, this game is neither developed nor published by Ubisoft. Instead, it's developed by Unfrozen, who previously made Eratus, and it's being published by Hooded Horse, who's probably the publisher behind your favorite strategy game. In fact, Hooded Horse put out a couple other games that I thought were bangers recently, including Nova Roma and Menace. So far, I have played Olden Era for about 20 hours, but since I'm a newcomer to the franchise, and the game is so deep there's layers upon layers upon layers, I swear, more layers than an ogre, I feel like I've barely scratched the surface. And as such, especially if you are a veteran to the HOM franchise, you should treat this more as a first impression than a full review. And so let's get into things. But first, a big thanks to Hooded Horse for sending me a key and allowing me to try the game early so I can share all of my thoughts with you. And so to start things off, the good. Things I like and think the game does well. Starting with the way the turn order structures everything that you do. See, the game is broken up into days. Each day is one turn. During a day, you get to build one building in each of your cities, and you get to use the movement points on each of your heroes. In other words, you're going to want more than one hero unless you are playing the game mode that limits you to one hero, which actually is a really good way to simplify the game down to make it easier to learn, though also it means you miss out on some of the intricacies of multi-hero strategies when you do switch to classic mode. So typically, what I'd do, early in the turn, I'd look around, see what's on the map. In comparison to a lot of other grand strategy games where resources are simply a thing on a tile, here, resources are objects that you can either just collect or that you have to defeat guards before you can interact with. Since I'm going to be using my heroes with my armies for that, I like to plan out my turn. Then, after I do that, maybe engage in some combat, kill some neutral factions, get some buildings that I can use to recruit more units. I'll head back to my city and use the resources I just gathered to build something. Since every turn's a day, after 7 turns, you then end the week. Ending the week means a couple of big things. The first of which is, you get to recruit new units. That's right, at the start of each new week, you get to recruit new units. But second of all, some of the things on the map both advance and refresh. Advance meaning fights get more difficult, buildings spawn more units, etc. Refresh meaning if something says, once a week get resources for blank, you're going to be able to go and collect resources again. And so that's the core gameplay loop. Get resources, build things, use those buildings to get bigger armies, use the bigger armies to get resources. In the very early game, I'm quite often focusing on unguarded resources, or potentially resources where I can use the combat mechanics to completely overwhelm the enemy and end the fight before it even starts. But later on, I'm going to be taking on more challenging battles, because very often, the difficulty of the encounter is proportional to the rewards you will gain. So you might gain a small amount of gold for an easy fight, you'll gain a large amount of gold and rare resources or a powerful artifact for a difficult fight. This means you're always incentivized to really push up against your limits. But remember, you only get new units at the start of a new week. So, the main limiter on what you can do within a week is the number of units that you have. And also, you have to be careful not to take too many losses, as otherwise you risk the enemy hero taking you out in that final confrontation, which was a mistake that I definitely made in my first couple of fights. There are certainly things that you can do to turn the tide in your favor, such as find artifacts to equip your heroes, invest in the correct skills to build your hero for battle, teach yourself magic, which you can use to cripple enemy forces, buff your own, or just outright obliterate stuff. Oh, and upgrade your units, where they gain cool new abilities and better stats. Then there are the heroes, from which Might and Magic gets its name. Each of these are a powerful leader. You can recruit them at the tavern, and in most game modes you're going to want to have more than one. Though if that's a little bit too much management for you, there is a single hero mode. Each hero has a different skill. For Etheric here, it's Tomb-Bound Will, which increases lich growth in cities. Remember how I said troops are a limited resource? Well, this is how you get more of them. On the other hand, Zam is a Death Knight alchemist, so he produces mercury, which is a valuable resource for the undead faction. In addition, as you level your hero up, they gain new skills. So with the undead faction, heroes start with necromancy, the ability to convert enemy units over to your side, or at least a portion of them. But on Etheric here, I have expert wisdom, so I can learn additional spells, more on that in a moment. Expert Economy, I can gain gold. Expert Resistance, reducing the magic damage my friendly creatures take, which counters enemy spells. Expert Arcane Magic, because again, magic is good. And Advanced Luck, which is really good for both dealing critical strikes and hopefully preventing your enemies from doing the same. Here's an example of a big battle that I had, which was actually the pivotal moment in my first win. I was confronting an enemy hero that had a very large army. So I immediately turned to some magic to buff all of my units, increasing their attack and defense, so that I'd maybe make the odds a little bit more uneven in my own favor. Also, as the fight continued, because I have a very high morale stat for my units, in part from all the stats that I've invested into Ethric, several enemy units skipped their turn. Now, I built my Ethric out as a mage. This means stacking a ridiculous amount of spell power on him. So for example, I have the Tunic of the Cyclops King. This is a legendary armor that gives me 8 spell power. In addition, I have the Seal of Silence. Not only am I more effective at casting spells, but my opponents are less effective. At least they're less effective because of the Seal of Silence and the Emerald Resonance Controller. To further boost my offense, Dragon Scale Shield, attack and defense. Doesn't apply to spells though. However, the Sword of Judgment does give spell power, as does the Wizard's Amulet. And of course my Bone Boots, which gives +4 to spell power, then plus 15% total. So the more spell power items that I equip elsewhere, the higher my total spell power is going to be, for a grand total of 25, meaning a lot of my offensive spells hit much harder. Though that said, Ethric's buff spells are just as valuable. One of the biggest mistakes that I made when I was first starting the game, I did not invest into artifacts, in part because they're very expensive, and also I didn't really invest into my heroes. I just saw them as interchangeable commanders. And then I went up against enemies where I would have a numerical advantage, but my troops were much weaker. And it turns out the difference is, the enemy had a powerful commander that could just unleash spell after spell after spell, and my guy barely knew any magic and wasn't wearing any gear. So I got wrecked. And after getting wrecked a couple times, I was like, alright, I need to build my heroes. Ever since, it's gone much better for me. Now, the last thing I like are the different play styles the game offers and how they play into each other. So, the game's going to launch into early access with 6 different factions, the first of which is the Temple. These are your normal humans. 2 things that I've noticed when playing the Temple. First, you get cavalry relatively early, which is a quite strong unit. And second of all, their Archangel is a ranged attacker, meaning it doesn't necessarily suffer from counterattacks, and can even be upgraded to deal damage at any distance without any range falloff penalty. Meanwhile, I found the Necropolis units to be a little bit weaker on their own, and a little bit more reliant on spells as a result. But after you kill your enemies, all of your heroes use Necromancy to convert some of the fallen to your side, meaning you build up a massive army. Also, several of your units can heal, and even bring the dead back to life. Then conversely, there's the Grove, where some of their low-tier units are more powerful than they'd first seem, since they have the ability to strike first. This means you deal a massive amount of damage to the enemy, provided you have a large stack, though they are still vulnerable to range. Next up there's the Hive, which actually I haven't played those yet, so I'm going to skip them for now, but they look pretty cool and they have a bunch of bug people. The Schism, on the other hand, is all about chthonic horrors, and I found their largest tier 4 units to be these giant hulking abyssal things that just absolutely terrorize the battlefield. Like, enemies will focus fire this thing and it just tanks stuff. And last but not least, we have the Dungeon faction, which has a motley assortment of monsters. I think some standouts include the Minotaur for being a nice beefy attacker, the Gorgons for being a powerful ranged unit, and the Dragon, because it's a fucking dragon, and good luck watching your enemy commander use magic on it, the dragon's not going to care. So, dragons are kind of awesome, and so far, my favorite factions, either the Necropolis or the Dungeon, though I have to say, if you're just starting out, the Temple is a very good faction. It's easy to play and learn on from my experience. Now, you use the law accumulation on faction laws. These can affect some of your units, such as the Elite Vampires, which increases vampire growth in cities and gives them health, or it can enhance a faction mechanic, such as the Necromancy for the Undead faction, or it can simply be an economy bonus, like free death, because who wants to be charged for death? or tax collectors, because along with death, taxes are the only other thing you're never going to be able to escape. Oh, and it gives you 500 gold daily, so maybe these aren't the taxes you should be complaining about. Then there's the Magic Observatory. As you build mage buildings in your cities, you unlock more spells. And if the observatory, you can spend resources to upgrade those spells. So Lightning Bolt, 25 plus 10 times the hero spell power. Upgrade it, well, all of a sudden it's 50 plus 10 times the hero spell power. Doesn't necessarily help on a roided out mage, but that makes a big difference on someone who's not specialized for magic. In addition, there's the high neutral magic. This is unlocked with points that you specifically collect using these observatory points. I'm just gonna end my day for sake of demonstration. There we go, I got a point, and now I'd go here, and I could use it to upgrade this spell, like so. You can think of these as more powerful overarching magics, with effects like increasing movement of your heroes, or just, giving them a portal, because why wouldn't you want to give your hero a portal and teleport your army to a different location on the map? In general, I found upgrading spells requires a lot of alchemical dust, so it's a good idea to stockpile a bunch of it, which means getting a bunch of these rare resources as well. And yes, if you mouse over anything, you can see how much you're gaining daily. And so those are the things that I like about Olden Era, which is also sort of a broad overarching introduction to many of the game's systems. I did not cover absolutely everything, but I think I covered most stuff because generally I like what the game has to offer. Next up, I want to talk about the bad, things I disliked or found frustrating. And to be clear, I don't think anything on this list is a structural problem. All of it could easily be addressed during the course of early access. And first up, it can be a little hard to find information. So, for example, let's say I want to see what my stats do. Here's Tarius. He's a Death Knight. All right, I know some of the basics here. But what does morale do? Well, I don't know. The tooltip is just morale. What does luck do? The tooltip's just luck. Found out later, luck is a chance to deal a lucky strike, basically a crit. Also seems to be a chance for enemies to deal an unlucky strike, anti-crit, they do minimum damage, etc. Really OP stat. But I wouldn't know that just by looking at a tooltip. Similarly, on the left side here, I can select the enemy faction. I can see, okay, they're Temple, so I know what type of units to expect, at least from their main faction. And I can see their hero's icon. But again, the game doesn't tell me what the hero does. Which, sure, I could hit escape, go back to the menu, look it up for myself. But it's a little weird the information isn't just presented there. Another example of this is within cities. Most of the time, the way I'm going to be interacting with units in my city is here. So I can left click to select which upgrade they have. Like this or like this. And I can right click to recruit the units. But it doesn't really show any information about the unit. For that, I have to double click on the unit and see, oh, these are their stats, this is their tier, and I can change the upgrade. I suspect the reason for this is because you are expected to do this through the Recruit Creatures menu, which does actually have all the info. You can even see all the different upgrades. It's really good. The thing is, that requires you to use the Recruit Creatures menu, and most of the time, I just use the quick menus because they're fast and they don't open another window. Also, when you click on the building for a creature, it shows the tooltip. I'd really love it if you could do something like that here, where, I don't know, whenever I open this and I mouse over, I just see the tooltips. And when it comes to battle spells, similar problem. See, a lot of the spells say things like, does not affect undead embodiments or constructs. But I have to just kind of guess what an undead embodiment or construct is. Well, okay, I know what an undead is. That's pretty darn obvious. Embodiment and construct, way harder to tell. I really wish when you tried to cast battle magic within battle, it would tell you directly, these are the things in the fight you can cast on, these are the things you can't. That's it. Right now, if I try to click on this question mark here, nothing happens, so I do suspect more help and tooltips are coming. They're just not in for the start of the early access. I also suspect if you're a veteran, you've played a ton of heroes in Might and Magic, probably not an issue for you. Me, as a new player learning, oh boy, it was a steep learning curve, and I messed up a lot. Which actually leads me perfectly into a couple of combat-related frustrations. So, first we have a tactics phase. Now, in the tactics phase, I can place my units as I want. The thing is, because I can't see where the enemy is or what the enemy is doing, which I get from multiplayer, maybe it's just an advantage thing, but because of that, I feel like the most effective tactic to do is just stack all of your enemies in a tiny little dot in the corner, and then wait to see where the enemies actually are and move stuff accordingly. Because you can have like one unit you don't care about. Let's say these hounds, I don't care about them. I could put them out here and use them to bait the enemy. They'll all attack the vulnerable foe. And so there's no real strategy for this. It's just create a death dot. That may not be a thing in PvP. I will admit, all of my experience is PvE so far. There are not that many AoE attacks against enemy commanders, such as you'd be facing in PvP. Death dot is bad. So instead, you'd probably want to do like a death line, where you spread things across the back row, and you still have one thing up ahead to act as a scout and or bait. And then you hit start, and you see, oh, they're all in a big giant blob here, and they have low movement speed, and it's a melee guy. Because right now, you have a huge advantage if you hit first. So if I do something like this, then the enemy's going to move up to here. It can't hit me, so I will get to move and hit it first. And this brings me to my second combat frustration, where sometimes when I'm positioning units around a foe and trying to attack, it's very easy to misclick. Because see, this is attack the enemy, you can see the sword. This is just move here, and then you don't get to attack, your turn is just over. Because an embarrassing number of times, I've just been like, okay, I'm going to attack the enemy, cool. Actually, no, I need the guy to be down here. I'm going to do this. Oh, crap, now I can't attack. I did not mean to do that, and it's happened way too much. Okay, admittedly, that was me dramatizing an event. I did 100% mean to just move and not attack there, just to be clear. But hopefully you get the point. Last up, the late game gets a little bit heavy on the micromanagement, and it starts to feel like busy work. Yes, at the start of the game, there's a lot to do. There's a whole map full of resources to explore. There are heroes to recruit and level up, and there are cities to build, and all of that's exciting. When I'm building my 7th or 8th city, it is not as exciting to select the buildings. And so I wish I could make some sort of template, or simply promote an advisor and let them handle it. After all, with combat, if you don't want to deal with it, and if you're strong enough that you can afford the attrition, you can take a few losses and just do auto combat. So I kind of wish there was something very similar for the building as well. And I could totally see something similar when it comes to heroes. Because, for example, some heroes I want to invest in. I want to send them around and have them get all of the best artifacts to have the strongest army and take out my foes in battle. Other heroes, I'm going to be honest, I just recruited them so that I could move units from City A to City B. Maybe I'm playing the Undead faction, and I want to recruit a whole bunch of units of a different faction, then convert them over to Undead. Or maybe I'm just upgrading them in a different city. Because this is something that's standard, once a week, all my units get picked up by the unit, taken to the other city and dropped off. I'd love for it to be automated. Speaking of unit recruitment, if I have the resources, I wish I could just set it to auto recruit. So start of any week, all my buildings are fresh. Well, I can just recruit all of my armies instantaneously. Or at the very least, recruit troops until I run out of gold. But again, this feels exactly like the sort of thing that will be addressed during the course of early access. And then finally we have the ugly. Little things, pet peeves, stuff that bugs me but ultimately does not matter. And there's not much of this, because Heroes of Might and Magic Olden Era is a beautiful game. But first up, there were a couple of bugs and glitches that I encountered, including one that soft-locked me where I was ending my day, and the day didn't end, but I couldn't do anything. However, these were so infrequent that I was never able to reproduce them or figure out what was going on. Second of all, no undo button. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying it's needed. What I am saying is, I made quite a few mistakes. So I got into the habit of, at the start of every day, I'd save. And if I made too many mistakes, did something really dumb, I'd reload the day. As I played more, I saved less. First saving every couple days, then saving every week, but as a learning tool, especially when I'm new and the game doesn't always explain everything, it'd be really nice to have the undo button just so I don't go, oh yeah, I wasn't supposed to fight that thing. But the game said it was a normal fight, so I thought I'd be fine. It was not fine. Then last up, when selecting a map, I wish there was a slightly better representation of what the map actually looked like. So Infinity is a good example here. It shows the 1 and the 2 up in the far corner. And then these like little house symbols and a big center thing. What this actually means is you start with 2 cities, one up top, one down bottom, neutral enemies in between, and then a big open area that is connected to your zones with more powerful neutral enemies. So the whole race to forgotten lands filled with immense treasure, blah, 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 that part I totally get. But I wish there's a little bit more about actually visualizing the map rather than the infinity symbol. Oh, and also as one little note, actually read the victory conditions because they matter. Because something like capital hold, that is kill the enemies. It is different from city hold, where instead what you need to do is find a specific city, i.e. the one in the middle, and hold that, and then you just win the game. I found this out because I did not read these at first, which was a fatal mistake because I thought city hold and capital hold were the same thing. And then I was building up my army to fight the enemy and I just lost. But yeah, that's about it for my nitpicks. So those are my thoughts for the Heroes of Might and Magic Olden Era Early Access release. Now, for an early access, this has felt very polished. Not quite as polished as the sort of game where you're like, wait, this is early access, not 1.0. There were a couple bugs, a couple glitches, a couple tooltips that weren't quite filled out. But overall, far better than most early access games that I play. Also, I lost a lot when I first started playing. Like seriously, first couple games, I got destroyed. Every time though, it wasn't, oh, well, that's bullshit. It was, I didn't read something, I did something wrong, I need to do better next time. And so I did. And then, I had a run that was going really well. I was playing undead, building up massive armies. I fought against the enemy champion, felt like it was their main army, and I crushed them. Sure enough, that was their main army. Then I just went from city to city, taking everything, annihilating their forces, and it felt so satisfying to finally win that game. And so yes, it's a very deep strategy game. It's a little bit obtuse, a little bit hard to get into, but those are the kind of rewards which are waiting for you, much akin to defeating a difficult boss in Dark Souls, when you do put in the time to learn the game. Personally, I'm going to spend a bunch more time playing Heroes of Might and Magic Olden Era. I don't yet know if I'm going to be making more guides. Definitely get subscribed, if that way if I do make them, you'll see them. But also, I feel like right now, I don't know enough about the game to be speaking about it with any sort of expertise. I'm one who's probably going to be reading and looking at guides rather than writing them myself, at least for now. So, if you are an expert, you've played all of the Might and Magic games, let me know some of your tips. What's the most OP things, and preferably, something that involves dragons, because I have a feeling that dragons are very good. But with that said, I'm going to get going for now. So, if you want to see my thoughts on other games, maybe check out my review for Menace and Novaroma, 2 other excellent games also published by Hooded Horse. Also, if you want to see my thoughts on everything, head over to my Steam Curator page, which will be linked down in the description below. Basically, if I play a game, I'm going to put some thoughts there. But that's going to be it for now, so thank you very much for watching to the end. I'm glad you've enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.